Drawing that line in the sand and saying you will be fired if you don't do this feels to me extreme.
TMZ reportedly uncovered the truth about Justin Bieber and his supposed downfall, and they're blaming it all on his involvement in a cult known as Churchome, led by Judas Smith. Lucky for you, I have gone to Churchome for over a decade, and I'm bringing in a panel to break it all down.
Show me life, show me love, make a change. Time is up.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Ashley B TV. I'm a former TV news reporter and Hollywood actress who takes you behind the headlines. Before we dive in, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, join our beekeepers, help us reach our next goal of 10,000 subscribers. Today is a very personal video for me where I wanted to bring in a panel of all different people who have attended Churchome, who can speak on and help us break down this TMZ documentary of these allegations that Justin Bieber's downfall, of losing all of his money, of destroying all of his personal relationships, is all because of a cult. We get very honest. We all have different opinions on this case. And we really break down, is Justin Bieber actually in a cult? Has this church gotten so out of control that it has taken on the tendencies that has become dangerous, especially exploiting celebrities? And if so, what needs to change? All right, so we have Megan Asa and also Aubrey Cooke. These are two of my friends and also former Churchome goers, and they have different connections to Churchome. Ladies, thank you so much for being on Ashley B TV.
Thanks for having us.
How are you guys feeling to start?
Yeah, I'm feeling kind of nervous, actually. I'm excited to have this conversation. I think it's an important conversation to have, but I'm kind of nervous because it's something that feels so public for something that is like so personal to me. But I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
I'm
How do you feel,
excited
Aubrey?
too. I'm a little nervous, but
The goal of this really is to show the world like what it's like inside the church. You know, even as someone who has attended the church for many years, we were talking about how it's so interesting that something so close to our hearts, right? Like a place you go for community, for worship, to dive deeper into your faith, has been put on this global platform. And I know that's how I felt having attended the church before it started being affiliated with Justin Bieber, and it just going on such a global scale once it started being built in Los Angeles. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to hear from our panelists on just their experiences within the church. And we're going to just dive into, you know, has this church become a cult? What has the culture turned into around the church, especially these mega churches in Los Angeles? How do we feel about celebrity pastors and their, you know, ties to these big celebrities and kind of what's going on behind the scenes? Do we feel like Justin Bieber is almost a victim in this situation? Like, how do we feel overall? But we're also going to share our personal experiences to Churchome specifically, in full transparency. Like, I've been, you know, attending the church for over 10 years. It's where I was baptized. I had such a strong, and still have such a strong, like, belief in the church. But here's where we get to just let our guard down.
I'm so excited. Actually, I'm like ready to talk. I'm ready. I'm ready to spill the tea.
Ready to spill the tea. The culture around the church community is very like hush hush all the time. And our channel is all about going behind the headlines in a very real and honest way. Megan, can you kick us off? Because your roots from the church stem much further back than me and Aubrey, and you actually somewhat worked for the church. So can you tell us about your experience involved in Churchome?
Yeah, absolutely. So I attended Churchome, which when I first started was called the City Church, now known as Churchome, and I attended that for about 15 years. So when I was from like 6th grade through, I never officially worked for the church, but I was an intern at the church. So there was a program where we got to learn, have accredited Bible classes. We got to do different things. And then, of course, as an intern, just like an intern anywhere, you're doing a bunch of free labor. That's basically what an intern's for. And yeah, I did that for 2 years, continued to going to the church a little bit after that. And then life took me other places and literally other states, because Churchome, as we all know, is quite large, has multiple campuses. And so that really gave me an opportunity to discover what it's like behind the scenes from a media and production standpoint. And, you know, fast forward 20 years later, it's my career. It's what I do for a living. Not in the church world necessarily, but but it was grounded in those things I actually learned back at Churchome. So it definitely gave an opportunity to discover yourself, discover ways that a church could function. But with anything, and this is probably the heart of what we're going to be talking about. There's pros and cons, things that went well, things that did not go well. I will say my production side, I'm so grateful for that. And it really sparked a passion for events and what I do now. But of course, there were, challenges as well.
We're going to pause on what didn't go well, and we're going to introduce Aubrey into this conversation now because, as you said, it attracts a lot of creative people, a lot of people like in production, in the industry. Aubrey, you were a huge makeup artist in Los Angeles. Now you built a company in Missouri, but talk to us about your introduction into Churchome as well.
It's probably polar opposite from both of you guys, because even as you were introducing this topic, I was realizing like, oh, to me, it's always just been like the celebrity church, like the big church where big names go. And I forget that it was once more not that, outside of California. So even that perspective is interesting in how we're each going to see it and view it. I was wary about it. I think because I know, Ashley, you and we had gone to another church for a few years in LA called Reality LA, which sounds like a TV show. And
we should have had a TV show.
Yeah. And my experience from that church was amazing. But there were some changes with the staff and the pastor leaving. And, that kind of honestly always kind of causes some division. And then I think on top of that, because I was on Sundays, I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was you, Ashley. It might have been you who was like, hey, I've been going. I think it was. You were like, I've been going to City Church on Wednesdays. And I was like, sure, I'll go. And I think the first time I went, it was at the Beverly Hills hotel.
Yeah, it was at a hotel. So essentially, Judah had started like a smaller Bible study. And one of our Bible study leaders from Seattle had told me about it. This was somewhat in the earlier stages. And he'd been flying into Los Angeles, having this Bible study on Wednesdays with Jason Kennedy. Sometimes Justin Bieber slowly got into the mix, and just a small group. And it started as almost like more of a celebrity type of Bible study. The Kardashians were involved a lot. Like I saw Courtney at it sometimes, and it kept growing and growing. People kept hearing about it. Probably what attracted them to Judah was also the celebrity, aspect of it. And then it got so big that they brought it to the Beverly Hills Hotel or Beverly Hilton. I can't remember which one. And you kind of had to know about it. Like it wasn't being advertised. It was definitely, hush hush. And that's when you came. And what was your thoughts when it was there?
I definitely was like, I don't know about this.
What made you wary? Like what were those red flags? I know we talked about a VIP section when we were off this call.
I feel like it's not necessarily black and white. It is a little more complex, also just based on like what I believe and what I believe church should be and what church should look like as a body. I guess like a lot of people would be going for the wrong reasons.
To see the celebrities?
Yeah, which even that, I was like, if they're here, they're here. They're going to hear the gospel. So that wasn't a huge deal. But I think one of the big things was it was so flashy. And I mean, I'm a flashy person. I work in fashion. I love it all. But we had a friend, I'm not going to mention her name, but who I think kind of struggled with that a little bit. And so if you're someone who is not in that world constantly nonstop, it's going to be really intimidating to show up to a church and women are literally in stilettos carrying designer bags. And it kind of just gave this vibe, this air of like, we go to City Church. And I think I was a little wary of like the intentions of the church. Like, are to gain like clout from this? Like, is this for show? What is this? And
or
then
networking?
And then I actually remember the first time I was like, after the service, I was like, I'm never coming back here. And I remember we met in like a big conference room in the hotel, and they had like reserved seating up front, and they made people who were, I guess, more average stand in the back. And I just was like really grossed out by it. And it wasn't even people like Justin Bieber. It was like, I don't know who you are. And it just, I think I remember, I don't know if I told you, Ashley, I think I kind of went on a tangent and I was like, what if one of those people back there was Jesus? And they're like, hey, you got to stand in the back. You're not welcome up in the front.
Yeah. So you felt like the whole like VIP section in the front, it wasn't more so like people who needed to be in the front, people who were part of the church or guest speakers or whatnot, or leaders. It was more so they're getting the status because of their wealth or their celebrity factor.
Yeah. And so it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. And it was kind of almost like high school, which any church can be like that. It felt very cliquey. And I know I personally like have struggled with that. So I think I was even bringing my own insecurities into it. So it was just, I've never experienced anything like that.
And there are a lot of places in LA that people go to be seen, to network. And it started to almost seem like that's what this was, right? A Wednesday night place to be seen.
Yeah, it was like, let's be seen, let's network. And, I don't have a problem with that. But I think I just was like, what exactly is this? What is the intent? What is the goal? And like, how are you going to do church? Like, and then I remember we started meeting at the theater in Beverly Hills. And for me, that was like a 180 shift. Like, I think it even changed just the vibe in the air. It was theater seating, which we were used to at our old church because we used to meet at a high school. And it was just like, come and sit where you want. There were still some reserved seatings, but that was more, I think at that time, like, it's going to be for Justin Bieber, which I even understand for security purposes in case he needs to get out or something. But that made it feel like, I don't know what it was. It shifted from like, oh, I'm going to church at the Beverly Hilton to like, we're all just in the theater that this guy has rented out to us. And it just felt more unified, I guess.
So you think the culture shifted in a good way?
I do, yeah. And so that is kind of, I think even in my head, I was like, if we start meeting here, then I'll maybe try it out again.
I want to bring in Megan now. Megan, because this is very different than the dynamic that you and I went to at City Church in Seattle and Kirkland, Washington. Now, it was a really big church, and it could be cliquey at times like any church. But talk to me about going from that church to then seeing what Judah is building in Los Angeles and how much it varied.
Yeah, so I never lived in Los Angeles. I literally visited the theater that Aubrey mentioned once when I was visiting you, actually. So, and I appreciate Aubrey saying, it's not a black and white, it's a complex conversation, because when it comes to like celebrityism, like, for a long time, even before Judah started coming to LA, I personally have had a heart and an empathy for people in the spotlight. I think it's really easy to just view them as characters. I think it's really easy to share all your thoughts and opinions, even though you'll never speak to that person in your whole life. But when it comes down to it, it's a human. And, whether their decisions are good and bad, they deserve human respect. And they, thank God my whole life's not like on the pages of a news cover. And so when Judah was coming to LA, I was excited about that because like celebrities need Jesus too. Like if no one, like who's gonna invite them into this space if every space they go to, they have cameras in their face and they're there for the wrong reasons. And so I think it's a really tricky dance because that culture is so saturated with what we know as celebrity, paparazzi, fame, clout, all those things. And so when he started, I understood how like it started in his buddy's living room and his buddy invited people. And then they were like, we can't fit 20 people in this living room. Let's, put some funds together and meet at a hotel. And then it started growing what I believe to be organically. But then to Audrey's point, like when you start bringing in the normals that we all are, and it's like trying to protect people, like what's that balance of giving a celebrity who's famous, and that's just the way it is, there's no being around it. What is the balance of giving them a safe place to explore their faith belief without isolating it so much that it seems like it's a hush hush situation. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I can go out to any church and no one's going to blink twice at me. Not everyone has that opportunity. And so do they have to explore their faith in their living room and that's it? Or is there a place for them to go and be vulnerable and like seek that out? And so I find it just a really fascinating conversation. Again, I'm not discrediting anything from Aubrey's experience. I think that that's a big miss and a big bummer to segregate people in any sort of way. I think that's not what the church should look like.
Well, and you brought up Reality LA, Aubrey, and I think that that's a good comparison, is that we had celebrity type of like Disney stars. I remember like Bridget, whatever that girl was on the Disney Channel, would go to our church, and other Disney stars would, but they weren't like propped up like they seemed to be at Churchome. It was a different culture, but to your point, obviously celebrities like need whatever their faith is too. A lot of celebrities go to a very specific, like huge Jewish temple in Beverly Hills. So to what extent is it like, are you welcoming the celebrities, or are you using the celebrity factor to turn this into something it wasn't supposed to be originally? I think that's
to
like
like
the
other
question.
people, basically. Like, hey, we
Yes.
got these celebs here, so y'all should come check it out.
But for some reason at City Church, especially at the hotel, I don't know what it was about the hotel. It was like, oh, they're here. And it wasn't just like it was like the celebrities and their friends. It was like an entourage. And it was
Yeah.
like, well, here, we have this whole row saved for you guys.
Got it.
And there was just a vibe. I can't explain it. I'm a vibe person.
The vibe was the haves or the have-nots. And I want to bring in what kind of brought us to this place to begin with, which is Justin Bieber, right? And the cult factor that the TMZ is alleging, that Churchome has become a cult, that Judah Smith is this cult leader. So did you guys ever have encounters with Justin Bieber? Was he ever at the church when you were? And did that change the environment? Because we start to see that Justin Bieber is now leading worship.
I remember several times, Justin would sit maybe 2 rows in front of me, and I'd see him. And I mean, for me personally, kind of going back, like, I didn't want to bombard him. Like, I didn't really fangirl. It was more just like, this is so interesting seeing all these worlds collide, like all these different people. And it's just like, what is life? But I do kind of remember like just thinking, like, I wanted to almost kind of like protect him and just be like, I'm glad he's here and hopefully he feels safe. But for me, it was just more so like, this is like, life is wild and this is crazy. But he kept to himself, he was just kind of like any one of us. Like, after church, we'd go find our group of friends and we'd mingle and talk. And, he'd go and talk with the pastors and staff on stage, which happens at any other church.
So you didn't think the vibe or the culture changed with Justin being there?
No, I think especially at the theater, I felt like people had an overall maturity and respect. Like, I remember Tim Tebow being there several times. I remember Chris Pratt showing up one time. And I think for the most part, which was nice, most people understood and was like, I'm not going to use this place to go and like get an autograph or a picture or something. I do think the church, kind of even unbeknownst to them, latched onto that. And it kind of created this ego complex. And it was this weird dance of like, we're a church, everybody's welcome, but we're the church that Justin Bieber goes to. And I don't think Justin wanted that. I think the church kind of created that. And it was this kind of like scale that was like always tipping on like trying to be humble, I don't know. It was interesting.
You see all over social media, and when you see a pastor kind of just promoting just the celebrities, then you start to wonder, like, what are the intentions, right? Like if you're promoting Justin Bieber being there, sure, but are you going to promote any of your other leaders being there, or are you going to, put them on a pedestal as well? You notice all over Judah's social media, it's mostly just like him playing golf with Justin and the other famous guys. I want to play a clip from the TMZ documentary and have you guys, weigh in on this, because they're starting to say, a lot of Justin Bieber's troubles have come from attaching himself to Judah, who honestly has been my favorite pastor like throughout my time of joining the church. So this was just, but it's been a weird feeling that I've even had of this attachment to Justin Bieber. And like you guys, it's like you want everyone to have that place to go to have that safe space. But are we utilizing this celebrity to draw more fandom versus like actual conversations? So I'm gonna play this clip and I want to hear your thoughts on this.
And
We're
now
talking
there's
about Carl
another one,
Lentz here.
Judah Smith. And Smith is different.
Thank you, Justin, for the opportunity.
He has a ton of influence over Justin. Some people are saying like he's actually controlling Justin.
And not just his personal life, his business life.
And that's where it becomes an issue where it's not just about Justin's been religious for a long time. And so him having a relationship with his pastor is not all that shocking. But when the pastor is now sitting on the board of a company that Justin founded,
Clothing line, Drew House.
And then that relationship falls apart. Justin's relationship with Ryan Good, who he co-founded Drew House with.
So can we comment on that to start? So now Judah's kind of involved in Justin's business. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I mean, from my perspective, just rewinding a tiny bit, I know, I wasn't at the LA church like you guys were, but we knew when there was that shot that we just watched of little baby Justin with his like hair on stage, we knew Judah was mentoring Justin then. We knew in Seattle that Justin was a part of our church family, if you will, or had a relationship with Judah before the public ever did. And so that's just kind of been a thing that popped up. I don't think, Aubrey said something a little while ago that maybe it wasn't intentional, but like something kind of started to form where like, I don't think Judah came up and was like, hey guys, I'm BFF with Justin. Like, I think what happened, or what I know what happened, is that, Justin's mom reached out to Judah and was like, hey, I have this kid. He's knee deep in the world of celebrity and he's like 12. We heard you preach once. We think you're pretty solid. Like, just want a good influence in his life. And that like began this relationship that has unfolded to what it is today. I'm no expert. I don't know, Judah and his wife, Chelsea, were my youth pastors. So to that point, I had a relationship with them. However, I went to a mega church. And so I didn't have a super deep relationship with them. And that was a long time ago. And I don't talk to them now. And I've never spoken to Justin. So all of this I'm saying from a context of someone who was around the church through the last 15, 20 years. But all that to say, just wanted to give some context, but all that to say, like, I don't know. I mean, yes, it does seem kind of weird, but also like if you have someone in your life who
that you trust
and you want to start something. So I don't know. I think it's really easy to spin it one way, but it doesn't mean that it's not true.
Yep.
Who's to say? I can't tell you the facts in that particular matter. You know what I mean?
I'm going to play a little bit more.
And Scooter Braun
Braun falls out. And everyone starts the...
So they're trying to claim that like they think TMZ is positioning this whole documentary that it's the church and the cult that Justin is in that has kind of helped this downfall and him losing all his money. And so this is their big, allegation that they're presenting.
Particularly, let's be honest, the people who get cut out of Justin's life are pointing a finger at Judith, saying that there's something
He's the reason why.
that he's saying or doing with Justin that makes Justin not trust all these people who've been around him and helped him in his career and personally up to this point.
Well, cut to the chase. They are saying this is a cult and that Judah is the cult leader. Judah has laughed at that.
Okay, so I think this helps start a lot of it. Aubrey, you're laughing right now.
Because the clip that's coming up is what I dissected last night.
Essentially, they're like, is he in a cult? And I think it's important. Let me just right now, let's read like what the definition of a cult is, because everyone can throw around the word cult and it's very easy to do that, especially when anyone is connected to something of faith. I feel like that faith is always like, that's a cult. But is this actually a cult? And then we'll play the clip. And then Aubrey, I want to hear your thoughts on this. So a cult is a deviant or novel religious, spiritual, or philosophical beliefs, a charismatic leader who is often seen as infallible or uniquely enlightened. which I would say that part is definitely true, but you could say that of any pastor, right? Highly controlling or manipulative practices that suppress critical thinking, isolate members, and demand unwavering loyalty. So I'm going to play the clip that they're referencing right now, and that's from Judah's Instagram. He said this at church. So this is still on his Instagram. And then I want to get your take on this, Aubrey.
This was a first for me. I got out of my car and was immediately surrounded by paparazzi. That's a first for me. And I was like, no, guys, my friend's not here. All of a sudden, this nice lady with her camera, turned on her camera, she goes, so is this a cult or not? And I was like, oh, my word. I wasn't expecting that question. So, guys, if you could bring the snakes out. We got some blood. All right, Judah, you can't start saying these things. People are recording you right now. I'm looking at Jason. He's like, this is not good PR. But yeah, that's a first for me. I didn't tell them I was going to do this, but like if we're a cult, we're the worst cult in histories of all cults. We meet once a month, guys.
Which is also, interesting to point out is since this all happened, Churchome used to meet weekly on Wednesdays. I used to serve outside, like I'd greet people.
Oh, yeah.
And now it only meets once a month. But how do you guys feel? We read the definition of a cult. We're seeing Judah's reaction. What are your thoughts on, is it a cult? And what do you think of Judah's response to that?
Just so I don't derail, because it kind of made me laugh, but then I kind of was like, oh. And I think part of it was because I remember him doing stuff like that on stage. I remember there'd be weeks where it was like, and it didn't even have to be like a serious, heavy sermon, but it just felt more humble and more just like, guys, we live in a city that is real different from the rest of the world. We need to love each other. We need to be there for each other like the church should. But then there are weeks where it was just like, I was like, why does this feel like I'm at like a comedy show? Like, I don't want to go to church and like see a pastor like do skits on stage. And so it kind of made me think of those moments where I was just like a little like, oh, please stop. But I thought about that. And so I showed my boyfriend last night, and he went to school for this. So he went to school for theology and all this stuff. He's been behind the scenes at churches where he has seen some pretty not so good stuff go on. And so I showed him this clip, and he's like, and he even was like, I have compassion for him. I have grace for him. But he goes, if you are a pastor at any church, you have a burden and a responsibility on you to maybe not make jokes like that. Even from my perspective, looking at a pastor, not just any pastor, Judah Smith, who's making that comment,
like one of the biggest pastors in the world right now.
Yeah, it kind of, to me, was like, A, should you be saying that? B, you're looking at your staff in the front row saying like, hey, I'm derailing this. You guys don't know I'm going to say this. So now they may have to do some damage control. And he's joking about it when there's a lot of allegations. And my boyfriend goes, someone in that position should say, hey, let's open up the floor. Let's have a conversation. Like, what is a cult? Like, make it a real, honest, vulnerable conversation.
Like we're doing right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what is a cult? Like, kind of like, let's keep ourselves in check. Let's make sure we don't get there. Let's talk about this. Let's address this. Instead, he makes a joke about it, which my boyfriend goes, and he goes, I'm not saying, and we both agreed. He's like, I don't even think it was like preconceived or intentional. He goes, but that is cult-like behavior. When someone is questioned, especially a leader like that, you kind of gaslight and you kind of manipulate and you kind of joke. Like, we're not a cult. Like, what are you talking? We're the worst cult ever. But people who are actually in cults, when they are questioned about like, hey, where's all this money going? Or why is it? They're like, well, you really think we would do that? It's to get people to not ask those questions. It's to get people to not question, oh, maybe we're in a cult. So if you just joke and brush it off, people aren't going to walk out thinking, well, are we in a cult? Like, should we keep this in check? Should we keep each other accountable? It's like, well, I guess he said we're not. And so I guess we're not. And that's how people stay in cults. And so,
honestly, for them to even clip this and put this on his Instagram is
that part's weird to me.
I want to read a couple of the characteristics of a cult to you guys again, because some of these are really interesting. It says one person or small group holds absolute power. I mean, you could assume that. Members are often subjected to psychological pressure, secrecy, and guilt to maintain obedience, which is what you're alluding to, Aubrey. Isolation, the group may try to separate members from family, friends, or outside influences. The cult has a very us versus them mentality. And I would say that this is kind of true within a lot of the church community. It's very much like, while they say all sinners are welcome here, sometimes it can feel like we're the saved ones and everyone else who, like, you need to help save your friends and bring them to the church. Exploitation, which is kind of what we're asking right now, financial, emotional, sexual exploitation in like dangerous situations. Are they exploiting these celebrities? That's a question. Suppression of doubt, questioning leadership or doctrine is discouraged or punished. What are your thoughts, Megan? I want to bring you into this. Like, do you think that Churchome was taking on cultish tendencies, or do you think this is crazy? Like, why is TMZ alleging this?
So I personally do not believe Churchome is a cult, and I do not believe that Judah Smith is a cult leader. That is my personal belief.
Yeah.
Do I think it's crazy that TMZ latched onto this? No, I do not think it's crazy. I think there's enough that is causing this conversation to happen that of course they're going to latch onto that. And I don't even mean that in like of course it's TMZ type of way, but like even TMZ aside, we're talking about this. Is this okay? How do we feel about this? Is this aligned with what we believe?
The Hollywood Reporter has an article out about it. Like, so there's buzz.
Yes. Yeah. So that part's not surprising to me because I think again, it's interesting from my perspective because I have a long history with this church. Like, I went to that church when Judah's parents were the pastors. Judah and Chelsea were my youth pastors from when I was in 7th grade until I graduated high school. Like, I have a long-standing history with the roots of the church that Judah now leads. Would I say that his response in that clip was his personality? Yes. Based on my experience, that's his personality and his humor.
Yep.
Do I agree that it was the right move? Maybe not.
Yeah.
Do I think it should have gone on Instagram for people to continue to watch over and over? No. Like, I think there was maybe some decisions that could have been shifted. I love what Aubrey said about, okay, this is happening. Maybe in Judah's head, yeah, it's absolutely absurd, so I'm going to make a stupid joke about it. But what if people are actually bringing this up, why don't we address it? Why don't we talk about it? Why don't we, like, I love that because all that's going to do is kill the buzz and be like, here's how we're
in like a real way. Cause a lot of people still don't know what a cult is. So he could say like, are we forcing you guys to be here? Are you allowed to leave? Are we forcing you to give us money? Which I want to talk about next because it actually wasn't this allegation from TMZ of is Justin Bieber being in a cult. Like, I posted this right away to my Instagram story and I said, that's hilarious. I went to this church for 10 years. Absolutely not a cult. This news isn't what stopped me in my tracks. It's actually this. And this is where I think we're getting into tricky.
There's all of these attacks that are being, slewn at him and at Judah and at Churchome, saying that this is like a cult. It is not what they're making it out to be. And I think it's because for the first time in a long time, he has a circle of people that are protecting him and really care about him.
And Brett Cooper is a conservative commentator here on YouTube. And so she understands that what we're kind of saying is like a lot of the liberal media likes to run with, whenever there's a church affiliation, it's the church's fault. It must be cultish. That doesn't mean that's necessarily true.
The people who are obviously bringing these stories to the media are threatened by that.
Who spoke with who actually sued the church?
This is where it gets tricky.
As staff member, it became very clear and apparent to me that one of the you have to do was just, hey, you have to give money back to the church. 10% of your gross income. This is a non-negotiable.
To not tithe off of a paycheck that comes from a tithe doesn't work for me. I'm just going to be real clear. It just doesn't work for me. You are not as invested as you think you are if there's not a money trail.
And I'd be like, hey, I really can't afford it. If you want me living on a street, I can give you 10% of my income, but I can't do that.
I'll be very honest. People have already been transitioned and moved on and fired because they were not tithing.
And then in February of 2023, I got a final ultimatum that was like, hey, if you're not giving 10% in 4 weeks, you're going to be fired. And so at that point, we decided to file a class action lawsuit. And the reason it was class action is because I can count on, two hands how many people have been fired for not tithing.
All right. This is what stopped me in my tracks, and it made me question everything. Tithing.
We all have a lot to say on this, but you go
Yeah, I
first.
feel like we're all like taking this
We're
in.
like-
It's like we just heard the biggest bombshell. I'll comment first. So tithing, for anyone who doesn't go to a church, it's like you're encouraged, it's biblical to, I don't know, does it say in the Bible to give 10% of your okay, so it does. You would think I would know this going to a Christian college, but what does it say, Aubrey?
Well, you have to look at history too. So tithing was a law that was kind of put in place not only by the Israelites for taxes, but it was the way that the church gave to support the community. So it was to help each other out as a church. It wasn't what the church has kind of turned it into now, which is like, well, if you have faith, you're going to give and then God will give back. It wasn't this like transaction, and it wasn't this test of like, how much do you trust God? It was like, no, we ask you to give this so that we can give to others, to help others. So even that, people today can have very differing views on it. You could
and we just saw the
dissect
clip where Judah, this is what startled me the most. We're seeing a clip. It's a staff meeting. Someone clearly recorded this, probably wasn't supposed to. It's different from just hearing an allegation that TMZ makes, but now we're seeing Judah in a staff meeting say, like, it's going to be really, like, I'm not okay with you guys not tithing since your income is coming from tithing. I personally think it's very different to encourage your employees to tithe versus enforce it. And the fact that this former employee is coming out and saying, well, it was enforced, and you could assume they're not making a ton of money working at a church. What are your thoughts on that?
She even said in the clip, like, if I tithe, I'm going to be living on the street. And Ashley, you and I know, I mean, living in LA, especially in your mid-20s, working 5 jobs, like, I'm surprised I was even able to like do what we did, like go get coffee together, like it is really hard.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Megan?
I kind of love this conversation. I hate this conversation.
This is probably so much more personal for you, whereas I don't have 15 years of relationships with these people.
Yeah. So. I love that we're having the conversation, and it makes me sad also that we need to have this conversation. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I do not agree with Judah's stance that his staff members must tithe 10% or they will be fired. Yeah. I don't agree to that. I believe that the church should always be leading with love and grace. And where things get tricky is that as churches continue to grow, they become a business, and you now have a church that is also a business who is hiring people, right? And then the waters can get really muddy really quickly. Regardless of the intricacies of that, to any other congregant, are we going to say, if you don't tithe 10%, you're not allowed in these doors anymore? Like, no, we're not going to do that. Right.
Good point.
And so like, why are we saying, and again, some people would argue, well, staff members, there's a different level of authority or leadership, or they should be held to a different standard because they're choosing to be on staff. But like, again, I just don't see how forcing theologies, I can see encouraging theologies. I can see teaching theologies, taking staff time to say why they believe as a church this is important, but drawing that line in the sand and saying you will be fired if you don't do this feels to me extreme.
That seems cultish to me, honestly, because we saw the documentaries come out on the cults that those TikTokers were involved in this past year. What was it called? 7A or something? But where they forced 10% of their income to go back to the church. And this example to me feels very cultish. And this is what really shudders me the most.
Yeah.
I told my boyfriend last night, I think what can happen a lot, and what I think even as a churchgoer, as a Christian, and what we should be reminding people who aren't Christians is you can have the best intentions and they can get warped and twisted. And I think maybe what has happened with Judah is he's believed this, but now he has stepped into this limelight level that he never expected to be in. And this might sound a little odd to people watching this, but I believe that Satan, the devil, whoever you want to call it, can influence this and can twist things to be like, hey, yeah, we should tithe, but like, is it really biblical? Is it really godlike if like you're not forcing them to tithe? You know, is it like, I think things can get twisted and manipulated, and that's a whole nother conversation, like spiritual warfare and all that stuff. But I think it can happen to anybody, whether you're a Christian or not. You can be living your life, making decisions, and they could be really bad decisions, but either outsiders or yourself, somehow you've convinced yourself like, it's fine, nothing's wrong with this. Like, there's
Do we
nothing
have
wrong
any
with it.
fear that if this is what's being posed to people who work at the church, Justin Bieber is now so heavily attached to the church, is there any thought in your head that this could also potentially be happening to him? Like, in my thought, I don't know if this is true, but I was told that Justin Bieber was paying the rent for the Saban Theater. That's why they were able to get the Saban Theater. Now, this is alleged. I don't know if that's true, but it was kind of told to us for many years. This is why we have it. Isn't this so amazing? Like, Justin's reclaiming his faith. Do you think there's pressure being put on these like massive celebrities? Because a tithe from Justin is very different than a tithe from you and me.
I mean, it could even be fear, you know, if Judah is like, I'm not okay with that. You know, we see it the way he said it was very, I don't want to say cocky, but like kind of cocky and just like assured, like, that's not okay with me. You got to tithe or you're out. But behind that could be fear. Like, if these people don't tithe and they're on our staff, then we could lose this, or we could not have this anymore. So what happens when people are afraid? They panic and they try to enforce things. Well, you have to do this. If not, then sorry, you're out. And then that kind of even leaves the whole, well, where's your faith at? Where's your faith that it's going to work out? And it kind of snowballs into a bigger issue, which can now turn into, is Churchome a cult? Which I also don't think it's a cult, but I do think anyone in that position can be influenced to start manipulating and taking things, you know,
even if it's unintentional, as Megan was saying.
Yeah. And so,
Megan, as someone who, you know, you were indoctrinated into this church long before even I was, how does all of this make you feel? Does this make you want to continue supporting Churchome from afar? Do you think it's one of those where, I don't think it's a cult, but we need to really, you know, make sure that leadership is getting the accountability they need to lead a faith-based church that's not getting manipulated by, these devilish type of practices? What do you think?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So many things are in my head right now. I'm trying to filter.
I've got you girls all wound up.
By the way, there's just like so many thoughts because it's such a good conversation to have. Like, again, like I say, I have this love-hate with it, but it's so, it could be such a rich conversation. I think something that's important about my perspective is that these things are happening. They're real. We just heard Judah say that particular clip, right? We know of other pastors who have made really terrible decisions, who've laundered money, who have, you know, had sexual allegations that ended up being true. Like, we've heard it all, right? And those things are real. And I'm not saying that they're not. I don't think that you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, because these people screwed up, whoever that is, church as a gathering is a joke. I think those experiences are real. I think people have trauma. I think shit has gone down. However, I still have this faith in like this collection of people who just want to get together and learn more about Jesus. And I think I have that because I'm currently in a community that does that well and does that transparently and does that kindly and full of grace. And so it feels important for me to share that in this conversation, that I'm not saying that these things haven't happened and that people don't screw up and make really awful decisions that are negatively affecting people. But I also want to share that I think there is a way to do community in faith that doesn't have to be that. It feels icky. It feels not good. You know, like I said earlier, I don't agree with the decision that Judah is making. I think Aubrey said something really lovely that I think ties into this, which is like she touched a little bit on like spiritual maturity. And I think something else that's really important in a conversation like this is like, and the beauty of a church community is that we're all in different spots and we all have different beliefs. And people have been for ages, for centuries, have been debating the theology of the word and what it means. Does it mean this or that? Does it mean this or that? And we're allowed to be curious. We're allowed to ask the questions, and we're allowed to have our personal relationship with God and figure out what that is. And that is why I have an issue when the church is not creating the church, right? The whatever group that is, when they're not creating a space for people to step in and ask those questions.
Yeah.
I don't think
If
that's
you didn't have doubt, or questions like that, that would negate the whole
right. What are we
premise.
doing? What are we doing?
Like, if I can't question this, if I can't, use cognitive thinking, if I can't change my mind about stuff, then what is this? What is the point of this? And I think something that kept popping in my head just during you talking, Megan, just this conversation is, and I've quoted this like several times throughout my life, but it's a quote from Spider-Man, and it's, with great power comes great responsibility. And I just think like, boom, churches, if you're going to be in that position, you need to be checked. You need to be okay having people check you. You need to also have the awareness, like, I'm in this position and I there's more responsibility on my plate, and I can't get away with what they're doing because I'm in this position. And I think overall, churches in general, because I agree with you, Megan, like even here, like being in the Midwest, coming back from LA, it is like a totally different story. Like I've actually met so many people this year who have been in cults, who have left cults, people who I know very dear who are like, I forget the church, I'm done with the church. But I think because there hasn't been any accountability, when things are called out, it's swept under the rug. Your faith is questioned. You're told you're not a good Christian. You're told, even Judah, like, well, if there's no money trail, then are you really invested? It's like, that's so gross. That's so sad. But even with that, it's like, we don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but let's check that, and let's look into that, and let's see like if this person can change their ways and can come back and maybe apologize, or can change things, make amends, whatever it is. But I think fundamentally with church in general, and a lot of people are doing that here, people are walking away from the church. They're walking away from their faith because of stuff like this. But it's actually causing this like almost revolution where people who do still believe in Jesus are like, I love Jesus. I love church where I can meet with people and talk. I don't like what the church, the business, is doing, and I'm not okay with that. And
I love that. That's a good point of separating church, the business, and church, the faith, holding leaders accountable. As we come to a close, I want to hear from each of you. Do you think Churchome is a cult? Yes or no? And regardless, what do you think needs to change? Just briefly, we'll start with you, Megan.
I think holding things with an open hand and continued transparency and the breaking down of any sort of, even if it was unconscious, hierarchy systems that have been built within the church structure, that needs to go.
How about you, Aubrey?
I don't think Churchome is a cult. However, I mean, I don't want to say like it couldn't become one if they're not held accountable. That's how any cult starts. I think
that's such a good point.
There's rare cases where someone very sadistic and manipulative does start a cult for the wrong reasons. But I think a lot of the times things get started, and if you aren't kept in check, if you don't allow your congregation, the people who attend, to ask you questions and kind of put you on the spot, people get it. We're human. You get addicted to power and control. So I don't want to say like Churchome isn't capable of becoming a cult. Any organization like that is capable of becoming a cult. But that's where I think, kind of going back on what I said, there needs to be accountability. There needs to be questions. What I've realized lately is you can extend grace, but you can also hold people accountable for their actions, and there might be consequences. So I think in this case, Churchome has consequences that they have to face now because of these decisions. But that doesn't mean that they can't change. That doesn't mean that, we can extend grace and hope that they do the right thing. I hope that they do the right thing, for that woman and the other individuals, because it would be a shame and cowardly if they just held their ground. They're like, well, we didn't do anything wrong, and that's not going to look good for them. So essentially, hold people accountable, have grace, but if someone wrongs you in that way and you have to take legal action, like, take legal action, That doesn't mean you're condemning them to hell. That doesn't mean you're like, I want your business to burn. And I think that's what people see that as, especially in the church. It's like, well, you're a Christian. You should just have grace for people who wrong you. And it's like, no, I'm a human. I'm going to call them out because they're human and they need to own up to what they did. But yeah, if they apologize, if they make amends, all the grace to you. So
yeah, I think overall we're learning that this is not necessarily a black and white situation. There's probably a lot of information we still don't know about this. It sounds like, pretty much all of us are saying we don't believe it's a cult, but I will be as blunt as Judah was in his video. That is, if the church is forcing people to tithe, and if not, they are firing them, I'm not okay with that. And that's my stance. That's not a church I can continue to support. Now, if they have made amends, like both of you are saying, and they're learning and they're getting counsel from higher above, then that's awesome. And that they are doing good work. But as we all agree, they need to be checked. Like, all of us need to be checked. They also need to be checked. And let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I just felt so tense right now saying I'm going to be as blunt as Judah was. But no, ladies, I really appreciate you again, like, to understand anyone watching this video, how brave that they had to be to even have this chat, even though we're not saying anything incriminating, but to even come on the internet and have this chat is such a brave thing to do in a culture that is so hush hush and is like, don't clap back. Just as Aubrey was saying, have grace, shut up and be quiet, right? So I think this is really important. We have to keep holding the church accountable, as we saw with even, the Roman Catholic Church. By not holding people accountable, that's when, sexual predators came to be. So we're trying to do that here on this channel, one video at a time. Aubrey, Megan, we really appreciate you. We support you. We're going to put all their links. Megan has a great podcast, and Aubrey has an incredible vintage shop. So you can find, all their links everywhere. Ladies, thank you so much for joining. The Beekeepers, now you're an official beekeeper.
Thanks, Ash.
Thank you so much, guys. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. And we want to hear from you in the comments. What did you think about this TMZ documentary? What do you think about the church as a whole? What do you think needs to change? Thank you guys so much. We'll see you in the next one. Ciao, everyone.
Bye.
Show me life, show me love.